sure that you had on your charts. Did you ever see anything as beautiful as that chart? You ever see anything as beautiful as this? All the levels that we gave you have stayed bullish. Every single one of them have stayed very, very strongly bullish inside that narrative. We've went from an S&P price of 37.80s, 37.88s, to a high price of 38.28s. 40 points. 40 points in that move in terms of the shape and direction of the markets. 40 simple square points into that move, isn't it? Just kind of crazy. When we look at the overall background to this move, we can already see just how much we started to build into this as a very strong value trade. In the overnight session, we started to see the ABCs catching a very strong bid. We talked about the real yields getting squeezed in last night's tweets, didn't we? We talked about that in the tweets. We knew that the yields were probably going to have to rise, which is going to be bullish equities. We know that's going to happen. We told you last night. It doesn't mean it can't change during the session. But obviously what happens in due course is we start catching a beautiful bid right off of half 12. And then when we come into the US session proper here, you start watching the storylines at the cash open here. And this obviously results in a buyer coming back in at that low price right off of the cash open right there. And that becomes your level, doesn't it? That becomes your narrative. And you can see when the ABCs go bullish again at that stage. We can also look at the Merrill's auction at that point. You can see there's a ripper to the upside, isn't there? Absolute ripper to the upside. And that puts a huge bid into this market, doesn't it? So look at that Merrill's rip. It's a cracker. Absolute cracker. When we look at this market, you might be saying, yeah, but there's a little bit of weakness coming in here. Yeah, but that's on the back of an opening gap up, which is just incredible. So there's obviously going to be some profit taking. What is the macro in this? Very bullish, right? Very bullish. So when we look at the ABCs, very bullish. When we look at the discretionary staples, very bullish. When we look at the Merrill's auction, very bullish. When we look at the sector rotations, very bullish. And remember, this was into a close that we talked about last night when I tweeted out how bullish the close was last night in here. Does anybody see how bullish the close was against what we were teaching in classroom? Look, the sector rotations were going straight up. Agreed? Look, the sector rotations right into the cash close are massively higher than the cash close was. So therefore, we started to talk about that bullishness in the sector rotations. We didn't talk about it after we saw today's market happening, did we? I mean, we didn't mention it after. Well, yeah, I'm mentioning it just now, but I didn't mention it afterwards. We talked about this as a sector rotation hours ago. We talked about these ideas. If you look at a tweet from 14 hours ago or so, this is what we were talking about. Equity class at close. This was at 12:46 a.m. In other words, 1:45 this morning, London. Composite sector, the sector rotations. And Merrill's alpha gives a startlingly clear view of just how bullish the close was tonight for an amazing long trade to develop. This was sent out at 1 o'clock this morning. 13 hours before the US market opened. Now, yes, things can change, absolutely. Things can change. And that's what we've got to realize, that just because we tweeted that doesn't mean you just all pour in and buy the damn thing, right? It can change. We know it can change. But that was an incredibly bullish start to that trade, which you might have been able to take advantage of from the gun. And obviously that trade gets tested in the overnight sesh 1 here. And obviously when we look at that, we can start looking at that relationship, can't we? We can start looking at different relationships all the way through this. We can start asking questions of these other relationships that we can put on our screens. We can start looking at the relationship in the cash open. Now, this was a very, very nice rotation here, but what we said was, remember we talked about this rotation here? What is that rotation right there in the short term? What was that rotation? Cyclicals. Cyclicals. Fecking cyclicals. You see it? So when we put the cyclicals into our picture here, look at that bid that was coming in at the 12 o'clock auction level, the level we told you to put on your charts, that midday auction for the DAX and the FTSE. The cyclicals are incredibly bullish, right, Mike? Mike's got a different colour. He's gone from his usual colour to a black colour. Have you been demoted, Mike? Imagine demoting Mike, Kim. That's shocking. So we can see that the cyclical rotation is the cyclical rotation is the Russell against the Dow Jones. So this is the Russell against the Dow Jones, and look at how bullish it is at the open. Very bullish. So that's the cyclical rotation that we're looking at right there, is that very bullish auction into cyclicals. And if there's a very bullish auction into cyclicals, guys, that's usually bullish for the market, right? Usually. So the takeaway is when we see this market developing a baseline here, we want to buy into that very bullish baseline. What about the top edge now? Well, obviously, we've got to try and factor this whole move into the move. So this higher price here is obviously taking out some of the bullishness on the gap open, of course. But what about the short term now, guys? What about that short term? Well, this is a sizable sell-off move. So what we're going to be watching now is we're going to be watching the price testing up into the top edges. And then we're going to start looking for the possibility of a market reversal off of a stop run up here, right? We're going to start watching the tape at this point, and we'll start doing that ourselves as well. I'm going to start watching this, and obviously what we do at that stage is we start looking at things like WeMo and see what WeMo's got for us.